our business can get pulled into serving our clients that might not be guiding us in the way of where the future is going. And you've got to really understand what your core is, what you're very good at. And if you get too focused on having, great success today and you aren't looking to the future, somebody else is going to leapfrog over your business and bring value, for the future.
Welcome to RevOps Champions, a podcast designed for revenue professionals looking to advance sales and marketing initiatives through the role of RevOps within their organizations. In each episode, we feature leaders who are leveraging technology to drive operational efficiency, revenue, and improve the customer experience. Listen in and learn how to become a better RevOps leader within your own organization. Let's get started.
My guest today is Chris Heim, President and CEO of AbeTech. Chris and I just met through our mutual friend, Chad Eckes, and I realized we actually share a mission, which is to help business leaders simplify seemingly complex technology problems. Chris, thanks so much for being here. Why don't you start by telling us a bit about yourself and how you ended up at AbeTech?
Yeah. Hey, Brendon. Hey, thank you for having me. I'm super excited to do this with you. So I've been with AbeTech just shy of 3 years. Our company has been in business. It'll be 30 years this coming March. We're a systems integrator. We focus on barcode, RFID, and IoT type technologies in the manufacturing space. For example, like a food manufacturer, think of product inbound logistics, tracking things through the manufacturing process, distribution, putting it on semis, sending it to stores. We focus on the technologies that automate that whole process. I got to AbeTech through our founder, Steve Schmidt. We became friends through our kids' school, and I was the CEO of a different company in town and was preparing for a transition, and just everything fell into place. And it's been a great journey. Nice. It's been a great journey both from a culture perspective, and you'll find that I'm very focused on people and culture. But our topic today, talking about revenue operations, is right at the center of what we've been working on as we grow and scale our business.
Awesome. Yeah, and of course, Chris, when you and I first chatted a week or two ago, the first thing you said was, at the end of the day, business is about people, which is absolutely, core to, so RevOps sounds very cold and technical potentially, but I want to preface that by saying that, RevOps, the two biggest reasons for RevOps is to improve your employee experience so that they can improve your customer experience. So RevOps is absolutely about people, and it literally puts people or customers in the center of the whole process.
Yeah, no, I totally agree, Brendon. It's something I'll emphasize through our discussion today. We use the term people first, strategy second, and that aligns with what you're saying is you get the people part of business right, then the strategy becomes a reality. But if you get those mixed up the other way, it's a tough way to run a business.
Yeah, well, and actually that reminds me of a model from Scaling Up, which is called the 4D model.
Sure, yeah.
By Vern Harnish, where he talks about the four things, which are people, strategy, execution, and then of course cash.
Yeah.
And I guess what RevOps really does is it assumes that you have great people and who your great customers are going to be, which then informs your strategy. And RevOps really is a lot about the execution piece, right? So how do you make your operations more efficient across those customer-facing teams?
Yeah.
And how do you make the day-to-day life for those customer teams, in other words, your employees, better? So, before we get into sort of the nitty-gritty, I wanted to just talk a little bit more. I thought AbeTech was such a cool name when I first met you. Can you tell us a little bit about the name and where it came from?
Yeah, it is an interesting name, and there is an interesting story behind it. Our founder, Steve Schmidt, was finishing up his MBA program at University of St. Thomas, and was in an entrepreneur's class, and he saw basically in the news that Walmart was requiring all of its vendors to start using barcodes. And keep in mind, this is about 30 years ago. And so that was the premise of his entrepreneurial class. And his professor told him that was probably a pretty good idea. he named the company Abraham Technical Services, really so that it would show up first in the yellow pages. So the founding of the company wasn't this super strategic branding exercise, but what has evolved, and we now call the business AbeTech, is we've modeled the business and the culture, the value system around Abraham Lincoln. And he's one of our best leaders of our country, and he took the country through some amazing change and diversity. And I really love the brand that's evolved from that. It gives us a higher purpose. Like what would Abraham do is a question that we ask ourselves as we're trying to figure things out. And both internally, the culture, the purpose, the value system that we have internally, as well as how we go to market, I think really ties into this name AbeTech. So we take it pretty serious. We have a lot of fun with it as well. And it's really been fun to see how the culture can rally around a concept like that.
That's awesome. And I guess in your introduction, you already told us a little bit about what AbeTech does.
Yeah.
So is there anything about your role as CEO and president that you'd like to talk about? And what are the one or two things that you focus on as in your role at AbeTech?
Yeah. So let's see. When I joined the company, it's a very successful company, had been growing, quite a bit, but it was going through growing pains. And you talk about the book Scaling Up, and they talk about the Valley of Death. And the Valley of Death is that as a company is growing, you're equally at risk of failing as you are succeeding, all depending upon if you build the right systems and processes and organize the business correctly. And that's really why I was brought in, was to help the company go to the next level. And I think one of the things I've learned through, leading business is you can't just focus on one part of the business. If you want to grow the business, you can't just add more sales power or add more marketing. You have to fill up the whole circle. And I would say my number one job has been to grow the company in a balanced way throughout the whole company while keeping our culture something really special. And so it's this balance between how much do you try to grow and how much do you shape the culture. And I think what we've come up with is a formula where we're finding success doing all of it together, but it's just in iterations. You take things slow, you have a good purpose behind all of it. And in the 2.5 years or so that I've been here, we've nearly doubled in revenue, nearly doubled in people. I think we've kept our culture intact really well, and we're also figuring out what do we look like in the future now that we have we're a bigger company. Not everybody is here in Minneapolis. It's been an awesome journey.
Yeah, well, it sounds like an awesome achievement. Well done. And I know you're probably just getting started too. You still, I'm sure, you still have a lot to do.
Hopefully, God willing.
So, Chris, what is the biggest challenge that you've had to deal with as a business in the last couple of years? And because we typically hear, and we want to hear a lot about the success stories, and we do hear a lot of the success stories, but of course we all realize as well that not all success happens easily, and in fact it very seldom does. It typically takes a lot of hard work. So could you maybe share some of the challenges that you've had at AbeTech in the last couple of years, and maybe how you've overcome them?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. I'd say, Brendon, the first thing, I'll call it right person, right seat. And we follow traction as a methodology here, but right person, right seat is really an exercise around identifying, do you have all the right people in the business? And once you figure that out, then you have to figure out, is everybody in the right seat? And we call it aligning to people's superpowers. And it's a really exciting process. It's also very painful when you realize that you might not have the right person, or that somebody is serving in the wrong seat. That's been job number one, I would say, for the leadership team, has been going through the entire organization. And what's beautiful about it is, as you grow as a company, the right role for somebody 2 years ago might not be the right role today. But if you're in a growing business and everybody has an open mind, you can help people move into new careers. And that's been very rewarding. It's also been incredibly challenging, and we've had to make some tough decisions along the way. But I guess I always take comfort in those tough decisions are the right decisions for the business. And typically when you have to make a hard decision like that around people, in the end, you're helping that person because nobody wants to be in the wrong role. And so that's been, Brendon, that's been job number one for us. I would say the second challenge is exactly the topic we're going to talk about. AbeTech evolved as being a sales-focused company with a really good professional services backbone, but there wasn't a lot of process, there wasn't a lot of structure, and it wasn't scalable. And we've peeled back the layers. We have a consultant that helps us, and his process is called the digital truth, and it really wipes away, management assumptions, and you really create a methodology for finding the truth in your history, in your data, in your core markets. Where do you truly differentiate yourself? And then you rebuild the business around those foundation blocks. And the drift that can happen in any company is after a few years, you start having success and your clients might pull you in a certain direction. And you've got to make sure that you're staying true to your core. And that has been part of our journey as well, is really making sure that we know who we are and what marketplace that we're focused on.
Yeah, that's awesome. So it's almost so really balancing the key ingredient that has always been the key ingredient of business, which is people.
Yeah.
But then on the flip side, keeping up with the radical change that has happened in technology and how that impacts sales and marketing, because of how that impacts the buying process, right?
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
it's interesting. Those are two very opposite challenges, but every business owner today has to deal with those.
They are, and maybe I'll just add. I mentioned earlier, people first, strategy second. I knew, and we knew as a leadership team, that we couldn't tackle these really hard business problems around, scaling sales and implementing a better marketing platform. You can't tackle that until you have all the right people in the right seat. And so it's not just words that sound really good. It's absolutely the way that you build a business. You first have to get really organized internally around your team, get everybody aligned to a common purpose and vision, and then execution. I don't want to say it's easy, but it starts to fall in place much better than if you had the order reversed.
Right, absolutely.
Yeah.
And of course, I think that's like the perfect sort of foundation for what we're talking about here today, but also just the general conversation and topic around this podcast, RevOps Champions, which is how do you then use better models as models improve, again thanks to technology and how technology has changed the way we buy and sell. How do you keep looking for what's next and improving and staying ahead of your market? So I guess the another question I have for you is, so RevOps, just to sort of for the listeners who need a bit of a refresher, is about the people, processes, data, technology, and systems that power and control a business's revenue engine through alignment and unification. So the alignment of the people, the alignment of the processes, the alignment of the data, and then of course the alignment and the integration of the technology and systems. And even though you don't currently use the term, as you were alluding to earlier at AbeTech, what would you say are some of the key ingredients to the success that you and your revenue team are seeing across sales, marketing, and customer service?
Yeah, so I really like the term, and as you and I talked when we first met, I hadn't actively been using that term, but I've reflected on it a lot in the last few weeks, and I really like the term, and I think it's an all-encompassing model that brings sales and marketing and go-to-market strategy together, and as you said, around people, process, and data. We basically started from scratch. Our sales model, we had a good sales model in place, but it wasn't scalable. It was very dependent on people, talent, and experience in the industry, which is great. But it can take many years to build up the expertise in our industry. We started from scratch with a marketing model. We completely rebuilt our website, but it wasn't just about rebuilding our website. We went back to what story line are we trying to focus on? What stories are we trying to tell? What solutions are we trying to solve? And that's where this digital truth project came into play, that we didn't want it to be what story we thought we wanted to tell. We looked back at the 10 years history of AbeTech and really tried to understand, what was the data telling us about where we were truly having success, where we differentiated. And from that, Brendon, we rebuilt our website to tell a better story. We implemented HubSpot, which is very near and dear to your business, as a marketing platform. But what I'm proud about with all that, we didn't do any of that with the idea that if we do these things, it's going to sell more or grow our business. It was foundational for us that we just simply needed a better platform to tell our story. And our sales team, they do a wonderful job when they can get in front of a client, but what about all the hours of the day when we're not in front of the client in an active sales meeting? How do we tell our story then? How do we remind somebody a year later when we had a conversation what we were all about? And our website just didn't represent who we were if we weren't actively engaging with people. And it's really been a fun process. I've learned a lot. This term revenue operations is absolutely the right thing. It's kind of like the concentric circle. You can't just throw a marketing engine up and call it a done day. It's got to be an all-encompassing strategy. And we're I would say maybe 3/4 the way through our journey, but I feel like we're making success. And
awesome.
It's been a huge learning process for us.
Yeah, that's great. And of course, you mentioned and I know I sent you the free assessment tool that we just created, and it was interesting that you were talking about the website, and that's one of the 8 areas that we assess when we're helping companies try and figure out whether RevOps is a good thing for them, and if it is, how do we implement that for them. The website is one of those things that, again, we see too often is completely left alone and completely separate from the messaging and the conversations that salespeople are having, and those need to be completely integrated. So that's a great example. Yeah. And then, Chris, you shared with me recently that you had a great win landing a big client, and that it happened recently, and it happened differently to how you would typically have won your big accounts in the past. Yeah. Can you share what you and your team were really surprised about, or what you plan to do going forward to repeat that success? Sure.
Yeah. So, Brendon, I think the story I was telling you is actually a client that we've been serving them for many years, at least 10 years. And our salesperson's phenomenal, great relationships. I would say that we all probably felt like we knew what was going on at our client, and not that we know every person. This is a massive company, Fortune 100 type company. But this deal that came through was through our website, and it was with a person and a division that we had never done business with before, and that person really didn't know that they were doing, that this client was doing business with AbeTech more broadly. And it was a great lesson for all of us that, telling our story through a digital platform, being very purposeful in how we tell that story, so that whether we're in front of people and actively involved in the sales process or communicating to the world through other mechanisms, we scaled ourselves, and we learned about something with our client that I would say otherwise we probably underestimated, how well we understood everything that was going on. So we landed a really nice project, but more importantly, I think we learned just a wonderful lesson about how important this whole platform is. It's not about us. It's about how does our client want to learn about what we can do for them. And sometimes that's done in the evenings and on weekends when we can't be with them. And I'm really excited about the fact that we now have a consistent story, whether you meet with us in person or you learn about us online. And that's, I think this particular client story brings all that together for us.
Yeah, that is an awesome story. And I think, and you've now mentioned a couple of times, you've mentioned the word digital, which again is another word that is completely changing its meaning, as we speak through RevOps. Because when you talk about digital, most people still think of digital marketing. But what most people are still catching up to the fact of is that digital. So in fact, sales is digital, marketing is digital, and customer service is digital. I mean, really, every department is digital today. And if you're not thinking about it that way, and you're not, again, and that's all part of this whole integration, is your entire business. To your point of this example of the website reflecting all the same messaging and content that someone can consume in their own time, whether it's a Saturday morning or a Sunday night, without ever having to speak to a salesperson. That's a perfect example of why that is so critical. Because again, that's what people want. People want, the buyer wants increasingly more of a self-serve type option, and not have to speak to a salesperson every time they have a question or they have a thought.
Yeah.
So I'm glad you mentioned that.
I like what you're saying. If I can just add to that, yes, we can unintentionally overuse this word digital, and I think the point, and in fact, your last podcast with Dan Mallon, it's about data, and it's leveraging that data to learn something and be purposeful in the way that you take action. Account-based marketing is narrowing your message down to a specific client, to a specific person. And that's what we would do if we're meeting in person. So if you use the word digital, it's just acknowledging the fact that we have interactions with our clients that aren't face-to-face. And the last thing that our client wants is some distilled down sales pitch, through some digital platform. That's not the point. The point is learning about the client and delivering a message to them that resonates as if we were sitting right in front of them. And I'm not saying that we have it figured out, but I think the awareness around that is the starting point, and digital just becomes the mechanism, to do that, as you were saying, if you can't be in person with that client.
Right, and of course, and that's another one of those ironies, because when you say digital, a lot of people automatically think that it's not going to be personalized. Yeah. But that's really the trick. The trick is to make every digital interaction that a customer has anywhere along their journey, whether they're a stranger, a customer, an ambassador, or an evangelist, and they've been a customer for 10 years, the fact that you can personalize your digital communication and contact with them that's really the trick. It's not meant to be less human. It's supposed to be the human plus the digital is what makes it better.
Well said. Yeah.
Great. So, Chris, as we're now squarely in Q4, and of course October just went by way too fast for most of us. Annual planning is well underway for most of us that operate by the calendar year. But for those of us who don't operate by the calendar year, I'm sure this is still useful and helpful. There seems to be a lot of business innovation happening right now. Again, thanks to the pandemic, because a lot of things would not have happened yet were it not for the pandemic. Is there something innovative you're going to be doing or are doing at AbeTech or plan to do in 2022 that you're excited about that you can share?
Thanks, Brendon. We have a number of things. I'll say a few things that I'll mention here are a natural part of our strategy, whether or not the pandemic is taking place. But there's a few additional perspectives that I wanted to bring today, just that we're observing with the pandemic and the supply chain, challenges that are occurring. I guess for one, I'd say, automation in the supply chain is probably needed now, more so than ever. I think prior to the pandemic, and which in the pandemic arguably led to the supply chain issues, you could compensate for an inefficient process by hiring more people, or just a lot of just kind of brute force type mechanisms. And a lot of those mechanisms are now being challenged. There aren't as many, people available in the workplace, supply chain constraints. And so I guess one of the strategies that we're seeing is our business and what we represent and the knowledge that we bring to the table is dead center on what's happening in the world. Constrained supply chains, labor shortages, inflation, which drives more automation. So I'm really excited about how well I think AbeTech can serve our clients in addressing these problems that are here today, and it's going to continue to be a strain. So that's one element of our business, and I think most of that probably would have been true whether or not the pandemic happened. It's just accelerating it.
Sure.
I guess the other piece is not triggered from the pandemic, and that is we can go from automating things to starting to predict things and be proactive. And the gathering of data, just like we were talking about how that can drive a marketing strategy, I'm seeing that becoming the next tier of automation and just intelligence of business is instead of reacting, how do you start to have predictive models that can take trends and analysis and start to forecast what might happen in a business? And that's probably the more exciting and the broader opportunity for us is how do we help our clients start to anticipate what might happen tomorrow, next week, next month in their operation and start making decisions today. And those technologies are becoming very real. They're becoming mainstream. And I'm super excited about the combination of that for our business in particular.
Awesome. Yeah, in fact, you probably haven't seen it yet because it'll be going up probably just a few days before this episode goes live, which is my interview with one of our clients, Rob Williams, from a nonprofit called Every Meal.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Where, in fact, they've automated, again, this is what happened during the pandemic last year, because they deliver meal bags to kids at schools typically, and of course when the schools shut down last year, they had to suddenly go from delivering 5,000 meals to delivering 50,000 meals. Yeah. And of course the only way to do that was through automation, and we did a tour of their facility a few months back. And it's just you don't think about all the logistics and how automation can really help them do their job as a nonprofit. But I guess in every business, innovation and automation seem to be very closely aligned.
Yeah, I think so. And I think if you can do it in an iterative way, you want to be careful not to tackle too much at one time because you can break a good business. And so we're really mindful of that. We try to, address the need of today, but do it in a proactive manner that, that technology builds upon itself for the future.
Right. Chris, as a matter of interest, what are the industries that you work with or focus on at AbeTech?
Yeah. I would say our strongest industry is food manufacturing. We have a number of, Fortune 100 and mid-market food manufacturers. And part of the reason that we're successful there is you think about food, it has a shelf life, it has compliance, it has, you have a lot of different ingredients, and it's a very complicated process to manufacture food. So there's a lot of tracking and automation. So we're really good and we're very strong in food. That leads us into the whole supply chain, both, the inbound and outbound logistics. And then that really has created a core competency for us that really any client that's involved in manufacturing, transportation, logistics is a good target for us, but most of that business was built upon a focus on food manufacturing.
Oh, interesting. That actually happens to be one of our verticals too.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Which we need to talk more about.
We should, yes, indeed.
So, Chris, the next question I have here is, you don't have to look very hard to realize that large technology or SaaS companies have come from almost nowhere 20 years ago to now replacing their traditional counterparts, in sort of any analog business or oil and gas or, you name it, brick and mortar type business as the biggest companies on the planet, whether you're talking about Amazon or Google or Uber, the list goes on and on and on. So it was so one of the things that they've changed is this very customer centric go-to-market strategy.
Yeah.
And they keep tweaking as the technology evolves, and I'm sure you're familiar too with the Jeff Bezos philosophy and quote of
day one, right?
It's always day one at Amazon, because they know that if they don't think that today is always day one and they need to keep innovating, that they will be disrupted, and they want to make sure that they keep disrupting themselves versus having anyone else disrupt them. Do you think more traditional businesses have anything to lose by going to market and thinking like tech companies?
I thought about this question quite a bit, Brendon, and I have a couple thoughts, for you. One is, if you step away from technology, every company needs to bring more value than you did yesterday. And I think that's part of, Jeff Bezos' message on day number one is, you've got to continue to improve your business. And the world of our clients are changing every day. And so I think the winner is the business that brings the most value. And the moment that you rest on that laurel and say, I'm giving enough value, somebody else has an opportunity to edge you out. So I think this constant striving for bringing more value to our clients is a really good, it's a good pressure, it's a good positive pressure for us to operate within. The reason that some of these high-tech companies are winning it goes back to everything we've been talking about today. They've decided to have technology that gives them data that makes them more intelligent about what their clients need. They aren't using management intuition as the only way of trying to guess. So I think from that perspective, every business needs to get more intelligent about what their clients need and try to anticipate that to bring more value. The second piece, and this is maybe going a little old school, but two of my favorite business authors are Jeffrey Moore and Clayton Christensen. And the whole market adoption curve and the whole market disruption theory, we all need to understand that. We all need to understand that our success, our business can get pulled into serving our clients that might not be guiding us in the way of where the future is going. And you've got to really understand what your core is, what you're very good at. And if you get too focused on having great success today and you aren't looking to the future, somebody else is going to leapfrog over your business and bring value for the future. And so I like to go back and look at their teachings because I think it keeps us grounded. I think the third thing that I would say, Brendon, is I really think that every business has some opportunity for recurring revenue. And if you can think about serving something in your business in a way that is in a recurring revenue, not for the scheme of trying to have recurring revenue, but delivering something that's bringing continuous value, constantly having a transaction going on with your client where they're getting value from you all the time. I think that's an important piece of every company's strategy, is to figure out, it doesn't have to be huge, it doesn't need to be the primary, but having something that's not just this one-time transaction, because that's what creates the dialogue in a natural way versus anything feeling like it's a sales pitch or a marketing message, is you're providing continuous day after day value to somebody.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I like that. And of course, it reminds me of a quote that we use a lot around here at Dynamico, which is, what got us here isn't going to get us to where we're going.
Yeah.
And this whole idea of the possibility of not only recurring revenue, but in B2B, and in fact, HubSpot just made this huge announcement, which of course then drove their stock price even higher.
Okay.
2 weeks ago, where they now introduced B2B. Essentially, they call it HubSpot Payments, but they're thinking about it from a B2B perspective, because there are still so many business-to-business businesses that don't realize that they can actually have people pay them on their website without ever having to speak to anybody.
Okay.
Which is a big part of what, and we've been testing this for a while, and it's kind of a no-brainer for a lot of our clients, where they can now essentially sell a service or a product on their website for the first time that they'd never thought they could do before, and you walk in the next morning and there's 3 orders that you otherwise wouldn't have had, or a salesperson would have had to break their back to try and get. And it's just so that you start to see the efficiencies and the streamlining of that, to your point, where you're just creating another revenue stream. But again, it's driven by something that I said earlier, which is the consumer wants the self-serve. They're looking for that self-serve option.
Yeah. Because
they feel that they don't need to speak to anyone to buy whatever they're trying to buy, whether it's a product or a service, or in many cases, of course, it's education or whatever. But they feel like they should just be able to go to your website if you're a thought leader in that space, or the best company that's providing value. You should have the ability for them to buy something on your website.
I totally agree. And I had one more thought for you on this, Brendon. It just happened to me this week. I had an invoice, come through to me from one of our vendors, and it was just an invoice. And I called our VP of sales afterwards, and I said, I want you to think about something. I just received an invoice from somebody that, and it's a large amount of money, and it was just an invoice. There was nothing else with it. There was no a summary of the service that's been provided, no reminder of the value. And I know there's value there, but it hit me as I was approving this invoice of what did I get for this? And where I'm going with this is maybe part of this bringing more value, is we have to constantly remind our clients of the value that we're bringing. And when you're having regular interactions with them, I think you've got a better opportunity, for that. And always I think maybe my message there is always remember that when we're asking somebody to pay us for something, we need to remind them what they're paying us for. And that can get lost in this recurring revenue model, because if you're just hitting people with invoice after invoice, you've got to make sure that you're coupling that with a reminder of the value. And I thought that might be relevant for today's discussion, because it caused me to pause when I had this invoice. I had to go ask somebody, like, what have we done recently, with them? And maybe there's a lesson in there for all of us. I don't know.
Yeah, absolutely, and of course, there are a few more parts of the value of this whole RevOps thing that we're talking about, which again, we all know intellectually that time is the most valuable thing that we have.
Yeah.
So why wouldn't we want to save our employees' time and our customers' time if we're able to do that, right? So that's one thing. In addition to the fact that the customers really increasingly, as the millennial market moves up and becomes the dominant population in our country and across the world, that's just going to increase.
Yeah.
But the other part of it of RevOps is there to remove friction. So friction internally between, let's say, marketing and sales, or sales and customer service, but also friction between you as a company or a brand and the customer. And it's sort of just tying all these last few things together that we've just been talking about.
Yeah.
We've often had this happen in the last few months, where we have someone contact us who maybe, they recently got HubSpot, or they've had HubSpot for a year or two, but then they realized that maybe they weren't using it the way that they should be, and they wanted some help just to see whether they could be better optimizing or maximizing HubSpot.
Sure.
And we do a very simple assessment, and we know what's involved, and we know what it's going to cost, and we'll have a salesperson from our team get off the call, and within 15 minutes they'll send a quote directly through HubSpot to that prospect. And they will actually, one of the reasons they decided to work with us was because of how easy it was that we could actually send that quote through HubSpot. And they were like, can you do that for us as well? So once you've done your assessment or your audit of our HubSpot, can you also show us how to do our payments or our quotations through HubSpot? So it's just, again, so people see these things and realize, why aren't we doing that, or why shouldn't we be able to do that? And it's just these things are going to be happening faster and faster.
Yeah, I love it. That's great.
That is awesome. Chris, was there anything sort of as we've been chatting now? Nothing that we've sort of spoken about before. Was anything else that you've been thinking that you'd like to share?
I think, Brendon, maybe what's coming to mind for me is I'm going to take this back to people. And, we bring technology like HubSpot, and we bring CRM, we bring more structured process, we clarify roles, we do all these things for a very good reason. That's to scale a business. But just a reminder that we've got to bring our teams along on that journey. And that can be scary. Change, it might not be clear to a salesperson that's been doing something a certain way. Why do we need to log everything in CRM? What do you mean that all my clients, all my emails that I've built up over time, that we're going to start doing outreach campaigns or whatever? And I think we've done a pretty good job of this, but you can just never communicate enough. And so this would be one of my parting comments to everybody: is as you're going through this RevOps journey, and the technology behind it is really, really important, to bring your people along as well, and find ways of bringing comfort to all these changes, and taking baby steps, so that again, going back to that concentric circle, making sure that it all grows and evolves at a same pace, I guess.
So, Chris, one of the things that we've seen a trend in the last 18 months. Again, I'm sure a lot of it has to do with COVID, but some of it might have happened anyhow. Is a huge increase in M&A activity.
Yeah.
And including amongst our client portfolio, which of course, when it initially happens, you have two choices on how are you going to react. One is, oh no, we're going to lose a client, or the better one is, oh, we might end up with a bigger client. And of course, we've had both happen because of course sure. that's out of our control. But there just seems to be a lot of M&A activity happening now, and one of the biggest things we know why M&A, or especially mergers fail. Acquisitions obviously have a far better track record, but one of the biggest reasons that mergers fail is because they aren't able to integrate, again, the people, the processes,
cultures, yep.
And of course the culture is a big piece of the people component.
Yeah.
But what are you seeing? You mentioned earlier that you've just made another acquisition. Mm-hmm. What do you see as being the challenges, and again, things that'll make acquisitions easier?
Yeah. Well, so Brendon, I'm sorry I'm repeating, but the people first strategy absolutely applies to mergers and acquisitions, investment opportunities as well. And I mentioned we've done 2 acquisitions so far this year, and it looks like we'll be able to close on a 3rd one yet this year.
Wow.
I guess part of what I'd say is we could never attempt to acquire somebody else's business if we didn't have confidence that our platform was ready to bring on that additional business. When we make an acquisition, we have a do no harm mentality that we want to first get to know the people and how they do things, but ultimately we're hoping to bring it all together and run it through, run that business through our systems. We're not trying to do that with brute force though, but it would be a flawed strategy to buy somebody else's business if you didn't have confidence that your internal operations were ready for that. And that ties back everything with what Dynamico is doing in RevOps. Once you build that out, there's so few companies that actually have done a great job of building out a really robust RevOps that once you have that in place, it's a competitive advantage. And smaller companies that have not yet made that investment have a choice. If they want to keep growing, they have a choice. They can either invest in that themselves, which can be a 2 to 5 year journey, or they can sell their business to somebody like AbeTech that we can bring them in. And so we're indirectly benefiting not only because we're growing our core business by having a better sales engine and revenue operations and so forth. We're benefiting because smaller companies see that their future is in better hands by clicking in with us than it is for them to try to stay on their own. So that's really exciting. We are not a private equity. We don't have outside investors, so our investment strategy is a little bit different. It's really about finding companies that are similar to us and just kind of melting everything together. And so far, we're having really good success with that.
Yeah, that's awesome for the benefit of everybody.
Yeah.
So and I mean, a lot of the things you talked about, I actually presented to a small group this morning who are sort of clients of a big M&A firm here in town. That again, I was there to speak about RevOps, kind of what we're talking about here, and that was again, I think one of the big takeaways for everybody is that you're just making it easier across the board for everybody to be part of something that works and therefore becomes more valuable to every stakeholder. To the employees, the customers, the shareholders, you name it. Everyone's better because things are running better, and that just makes it more fun for everybody.
We have just today we have nine engineers from one of the companies we just acquired. They traveled here from Ohio, and they made the comment today when I was meeting with them that just having all these systems in place and having this stuff in place is just so much more sophisticated than what they had as a smaller company. And that's not to say that it was bad before, but it's mergers and acquisitions don't have to be scary for employees. It actually can be a very rewarding career building thing because now they can spend more time doing the things that they love and have a reliable system that can do all the things that, are just ultimately are kind of manual or maybe not value add in the background.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting because you just said this, but the host of the presentation that I did this morning, his last bullet point was, and I didn't even, I had nothing to do with this, but he came up with it on his own, where he was saying that RevOps, apart from all the other things that we'd already talked about, is what's going to give you the competitive advantage.
Yeah,
and that's exactly what you just said and what you just explained in really good detail.
Yeah.
And who doesn't want that? Going into a new year with and putting the last 2 years behind us, even though it sounds like you've really excelled this year. But I think that's a great message to end with, Chris.
Yeah.
So thanks so much.
Oh gosh, this has been great, Brendon. Yeah, I appreciate it. I wish you the best. I'm really excited about what your business is focused on, and the service you're providing is important for companies that recognize that in order to grow, they have to build out an engine that supports that, and what you're doing is really important work.
Thanks so much, Chris. And I think that so I'm going to end here today with number one, don't forget it's always about the people. And number two is if you can get a competitive advantage, why not do that?
Absolutely. Yeah. Been super fun, my friend.
Thank you for checking out this episode of RevOps Champions. This show is powered by Dynamico, a HubSpot consulting firm helping businesses level up the technology systems that power their ability to scale. If you enjoyed what you learned in this episode, make sure to follow RevOps Champions wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. Or visit RevOpsChampions.com to get immediate access to all of the latest episodes.